Live
So,
online.
all right. So let's start with this. So this is the Capoeira in Canada podcast, and with us, I have Contra-Mestre Pirata from Montreal, Quebec. Um, Now you'll have to forgive me because I don't know which suburb of Montreal you're in. So maybe you can tell
Uh,
us.
I'm in Montreal directly. I
It,
teach in Pointe Claire, which is a suburb on it's on the island, but it's a little bit out. But I live in Montreal.
okay. Okay. Cool. Awesome. So first off, thank you. We've known each other for quite some time, and this was, as I was telling you before we got started, just a out of boredom COVID project,
Yeah,
spawned
yeah,
by,
we did a lot of those.
sparked by a few other ideas that were going on. Well, I've
But thank
been
you for having me. Thank you for thinking of me and including me in this. I'm honored. Thank you so much.
no problem, no problem. It's important because, well, for the people who hopefully start listening to this and watching this, the idea behind this was basically to reach out to everybody I've either connected with or reconnected with over the past 4 years. It's been almost 5 years now, 4 years, um, and talk about um, who you are. Why you started teaching, and we've what what challenges you face in running an academy, and we can basically kind of like who is Contra-Mestre Pirata, and what does he do. I'm not going to say I won't go down the who's your daddy and what does he do path, but I want to keep it light. It's not, we can, if there, we can just let's have a good time, relax, and so yeah, tell us, um, you know, who is Contra-Mestre Pirata? When did he get started in capoeira? What's, you know, how long has it been for you to get to where you are today?
Okay. Well, I've always had a passion for martial arts. I started doing martial arts when I was maybe 5-ish years old with my dad. He took me to this dojo where he was practicing, so I started practicing with him. It was Taekwondo, Judo, and traditional Jiu-Jitsu at the time, all in the same group. So I did that for a while, and growing up, I got out of it, got back in, got out again. Then I got a lot into dancing. Right, I discovered the hip hop dancing. Right, I was already a friend of mine, a cousin of mine actually was having me listen to some music. So first time I started hearing hip hop in the '80s, early '80s, I was like, okay, this is interesting. And then he showed me a few dance steps, and I started from there. So I got into dance a lot more. Never really stopped. So I've been teaching dance, choreographing, doing competition stuff like that. And at some point while I was teaching, I was I saw a video of a show in Brazil, the show Oba Oba. So I saw that. I was like, what is this that they're doing? Like the kicks are so fast, incredible movements, acrobatics. I was like, wow, this is insane. Then I saw it again in the movie Only the Strong in 94,
Mm-hmm.
94, 95. Like most non-Brazilian capoeiristas, that's how I really discovered capoeira. And I was like, okay, I need to learn that. This is what I need to learn. And maybe 2, 3 years after, I found a school. So a friend of mine had found a little what do you call it? Like a little piece of paper on a post outside saying capoeira. So okay, cool. Right back then, nothing was on the internet that much,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah, for
so I
sure.
saw it. Yeah, so he gave me that. I called the number. I went to check it out, and I was like, "Yeah, that's what I'm looking for." So I joined and never stopped. So that's how I came into capoeira. Discovered it through movies, shows, even video games like Tekken. Right, that the first was like, "Whoa, what is this?" So that's how I discovered capoeira and got into it. I've been doing it since '97. Um, yeah, it's become like this passion, right? Like can't get away from it. I love it so much. There's so many elements that can keep you hooked, right? Whether it's the movements that are interesting, the conversation you have with other people in the movements in the game in the harda. Um, Once you start to understand the language, uh, you really start to feel the music and the songs. Then you get into that. So there's so many aspects to draw you in, right? So it's a complete art form. It has everything. I make this parallel often. It's very much like hip hop culture, like the same kind of elements. I was actually reflecting upon that this week because you know how in hip hop they have the four elements, or five actually, which is the DJing, the dancing, which is breaking, the MCing, the rappers, and the graffiti artists, which are the writers.
Mm-hmm.
There's very close similarities in the elements, right? So in capoeira you have the movement, the jogo, and different, and then you have different ways of playing, right? Aggressive game, light game, playful game, acrobatic game.
Driven by
Yeah,
the rhythms, right? Driven by the different talkies that we have to understand.
exactly. Then the DJing side would be the bateria. Like you have all the different rhythms that you can play, the variations that you'll do in your music, the singing. So there's a lot of similarities, even in the way that we do our things. Like we're in circles all the time. So many parallels to be drawn. So yes, so there's just so much to draw somebody in. Like you can get into so many of these spheres and be like, you can't get bored. There's always something,
There's
right?
always something to learn, right? For sure,
Yeah.
for sure. When you started, did you start with Messe Pinina? Was he the one of the like founding capoeiristas of Montreal? Would you say, or
No, when I started, there was very little capoeira in Montreal when I started. When I started, there was Ayana, which was my first teacher.
okay?
He had been in Montreal for not long, maybe between 6 months to a year, I think, that he was there. So I started with him, and I know there was an Angolero group back then that I heard of, and that was it. In Montreal, there was only these two groups.
Mm.
There had been capoeira before, which I found out later on. There was Nesderaldo, who's in Boston now. He used to be teaching in Montreal way back when, like in the 80s,
Ah,
right?
okay, okay,
80s or early 90s. But yeah, he used to be teaching here before.
right.
I met him only much, much, much later. So when I started, there were only two groups: the Angolero group. Uh, I don't know if they had a name back then because they've been through a lot of changes as well, and us. And from there, then it started getting different. More people came in, people split, started different groups, stuff like that. Other people came in. So yeah, so Mespinilla, I only met him in uh, when was it? I think it was in maybe 2000, 2001, I think.
Had to have been the early 2000s because I do remember um, 2005 was the first time I visited the Equipe Capoeira Brasileira Academy. You guys were right downtown
Yeah.
Montreal, right? And um, yeah, there's a lot of fun stories from that event. But yeah,
So yeah, so the group that we were back then was Associação de Capoeira Novos Baianos.
okay,
That's from Brasilia. But our teacher in Montreal, Aena, he used the name Capoeira Pau Brasil. So that's the name that we would use, even though we still had the patch on our abadas. So we didn't really know much back then. Like we had the patch, we had the name. We didn't really know what the patch represented. Like we didn't have that conversation about, okay, we're part of this lineage or whatever. It wasn't really there. Um, Out of these people that were training back then in the first iteration of our group, there's me and Hook were like the two eldest ones,
okay,
and Hook is still here today.
yes, yes,
So it's funny how everything is in a pyramid, right? A lot of people at the bottom and a few at the top.
yep,
Um, so in 2000, 2001, Mespinier was invited to Montreal for an event, and it coincided with this, not the split, but our teacher leaving the group that he was in, leaving the mestre that he was in to affiliate himself with the mestre that Mespinier was under. So he affiliated himself with Mestre Oscar from Escola Brasileira, and from there was a big drastic change in our capoeira and everything. To me personally, the way that I saw it, it felt like we were what's the term that I'm looking for? In French, it's encadré, but framed. Like everything was
uh,
clarified,
I
right?
see.
Jenga is like this, not like that. Your arm should be here, not just completely freestyle. Like before, a lot of stuff was a bit too freestyle. You need that element too, but it was a bit
So
too much.
there was more direction to explain the intent and the purpose of a lot of the movement, as opposed
Yes.
to just making it look good.
Yeah, so a lot of things were clarified, the techniques. So our games and our movements become a lot more technical than what we were doing before.
Hmm.
Um, Not to the extent that we would lose on creativity in the game, but it gave us a much needed correction in the way that we would do things to fully understand, to understand better actually. So that was a big change. It was a good needed change. We all evolved from that. Even Ayana, who's Mestrando now, he his capoeira changed a lot. He had to adapt because he's already a teacher, right? So
Hmm.
from from teaching one way from one lineage and then completely at one point changing everything that you're doing to adapt to a somewhat different style, it's hard work. You have to assimilate that in order to be able to transmit it to your students afterwards. So it's a big leap and a big challenge. So he did that. It was good for him, good for us. So we were part of that group, and then later in I think 2003, between 2003 and five, I don't remember the exact year. I think it's 2003. There was a split in the Escola Brasileira. There was you know, like every group has their issues or problems, and some people left, and some people stayed, and the people who left, most of them became what we know today as Equipe Capoeira Brasileira. So went through a name change again. Like nothing changed in our capoeira because it was the
Hmm.
same thing, it's just a different direction, and yeah. So
Nice.
that's what it is.
So that's a little bit about the history of Equipe Capoeira Brasileira. What about you? At what point did you decide to, or maybe you didn't decide? When was it time for Pirata to kind of to start teaching on his own?
Hmm. On my own, I started teaching on my own in 2007. No, 2008, I think. Yeah. Yeah, it was my choice. I always wanted to teach at one point. At one point, I always wanted to teach when I would get to the right moment. But I had started teaching out of necessity. My teacher would ask me to teach. I started teaching way too early.
Mm.
But my teacher asked me to teach, right? Like he needed to cover more classes. And later in life, after reflecting, like, oh, I was not ready to teach back then. So, but that was back in the days when we were Pau Brasil. After we changed, it was like, okay, yeah, everything got into perspective. It's like, okay, good thing we did not get the next corda because
Mm.
that would have put us somewhere where we'd be like a whack instructor, right? So it took a lot more time to get our next chords. So I got my formato chord in 2007, and in 2008 is when I started teaching. I actually started teaching after I had left the group for a few months. Some things were going on that I was not pleased with, so I decided to take a break from the group, or not take a break, but actually leave the group. And I started teaching on my own. I had no, I had the graduation to do it, so I was like, I'm not doing anything wrong, so I went to start teaching. I did that for maybe 3 years. I think about 3 years. I stopped in 2011 because I decided to go back to school, university.
Mm.
So it was taking too much time and investment, so I stopped and started over again in 2015. So I had left the group. Then I went to a party with some people from Capoeira, and Mespinier was there. And he was like, "Yo, we don't talk. How come we don't talk no more? What's going on? Blah blah blah. You have to come back." So I explained to him what my issue was because my issue was not with him. So I explained to him what the issue was, and we cleared it up, and we cleared the air, and the academy was going through some changes as well, and that's pretty much what the time where he completely took control of the academy, and I went back after that. And then I've been with him ever since.
Nice.
And then when I started, so I had stopped teaching and I started again in 2015 because I was finishing university. So I started teaching again, but this time I decided to go to the West Island of Montreal because I was downtown, close to every other academy that's there or every other group that's already there,
Right.
and it was working fine. But I find it saturated. Right? There's
Yes.
some just, Montreal's not huge, but there's still so many options in a close space. It's like anybody who wants to start teaching capoeira is like, why would you put yourself in that spot, right? There's already so many options that there's not much left of the market.
Yep.
So, and I don't think about it as market because it's not, to me, it's not a job. Like that's not what's paying my rent or putting food on my
For
table,
sure,
right?
for sure.
So
But we
to me, I
always
just,
have to, something I've discovered over the past couple of years, is we have to still maintain a, while it's not our bread and butter, we still need to understand and treat it with a bit of a business perspective,
yeah,
right?
that too. You still got to be professional about it. You
Absolutely.
gotta treat it the same way as if it's a business because you need to do publicity, you need to advertise, you need to bring in people. So because
And
or else you're paying the rent of
pay
your
rent. Yes.
so all these factors all that factors in. So I decided to go to the West Island. It's something that I had thought a long time ago when I first started. All right, one day I'll be a teacher. I'd like to go teach in that area. And so I went up and I did it. And I've been teaching there consistently since 2015. And it's working well. It's always the same thing. Like a lot of capoeira teachers will be in that situation where um, you don't quite have enough students to pay for your rent or whatever. So for me, some of them comes out of my own pocket, but not so much. Right? Again, it's an acceptable amount. So I cover the rest,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's it. So I've been teaching there.
Subsidize things a little bit until it grows, right?
Yeah.
No, I get it. I get it for sure. Um, so tell us about some of what have been some of your greatest challenges in starting and maintaining the academy since you've
Uh,
gone to West Island.
the greatest challenges were to just to get your name out there, right? To get people to see you because back in the day, every publicity was a lot easier. You put an ad in the paper
Mm,
or put up some flyers in the street or whatever, and word of mouth, pass some flyers, and people would find out, and poof, you would get a rush of people coming in to see, and then the rest would just work itself for that kind of activity. But now, in the age of internet and Facebook and everything else, Instagram, everybody's doing their publicities there, and I feel when it first started, it worked very well, right? Put your ads on Facebook or whatever, but
yeah, yeah.
now you put it on Facebook, it's like anything else. Like it just gets lost into whatever. So unless you're like Nike or whatever,
Right.
right? You'll put an ad, you have the money to invest, and you'll reach everyone, and fine. But for this kind of service, unless you're a conglomerate or whatever, I don't think
Like,
it works for us. It works for the community only. Like if you have an event,
mm,
like you put up your event on Facebook, you make a publicity for it or whatever,
yeah, because
it
you're
will
gonna
work.
have people like on your, well, we talk about social media in particular, which is pretty much the biggest driver these days for advertising.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, like most times, any of your all your social media presence, the majority of your followers are going to be those people who are already involved with the capoeira community in one way or another,
Exactly.
right? They're not
Yeah.
they're not people typically they're not people who are aware that it's available. I've encountered similar challenges as well, in ways that has helped. But yeah, like I hear you with respect to the amount of funding required to make that functional for an academy at our level.
Yeah.
Unless some reason you get lucky and you won the provincial lottery, and now you can throw away a couple $1,000s or whatever. It's it's definitely difficult for
Yeah,
sure.
because you definitely at this stage until you have, let's say, an academy. Because to me, I don't have an academy. Like I teach, I rent time in an existing dojo
Yep.
or dance studio or whatever, and I think that's the easiest option because to invest and actually have an academy, that's a lot more sacrifice. You
Mm-hmm.
need to work 3, 4, 5 times more to get your publicity out there, to get in those students, and that stress will also affect, for some people, will affect the job, right? Because now you're worried about rent, you're worried about this, you're worried about
Mm-hmm.
that. So money is constantly on your mind. So sometimes there's compromises that can happen with the way that you teach or how you teach or what you teach, or because I mean I've seen it in some people where some people would behave one way in the class. It's like ooh, you would get your ass kicked for that, right? And but for some reason, like certain things can slide sometimes. So yeah, but you still have to invest so much. So you have to calculate your time, not your time because you don't pay yourself, right? But when you have an academy, yes. But when you don't, all the time that you invest in doing it, your gas to go from point A to point B, from work to there to back home, the website that you have to keep maintaining, the publicity you have to pay for,
Yeah.
or anything else, your rent,
It's
the
a second
material, the
job.
uniforms.
It's a
It is.
second job. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
whether you have an academy or not, you're investing a lot more than
You're investing a lot
than
more
any other
than
hobby.
you know, the other students who are just going to class,
Yep.
and then you have, you know, people. I think some people forget that, you know, you know, like in my case, you know, I still feel as though um, I'm still responsible for myself to continue learning under Messer Lua, right? So, you know, in teaching my own classes, and then, but I'm still attending classes with Messer Lua. So,
Mhm.
you know, there's that as well, and then all the other overhead of maintaining and trying to publicize and get out the word out in your own community,
Yeah.
right? That you exist and that it's available, you know,
Mhm.
which is pretty interesting. Um, let's talk about this is one that was kind of an interesting question that came to mind to myself, and you know, for someone like you who has, you know, for the most part, well, I mean, I would say most likely since the late 90s and up until now, you know, which has pretty much been the evolution of the capoeira scene here in Canada. You know, how do you think, or do you believe that there, you know, has Canadian culture had any influence on capoeira, and how so, if it has? At least
Hmm.
within Canada, at least within the academies within Canada, do you see a difference, or has there been any influence in your mind?
Um, and yeah, there is some influence, I think. How much of that is, well, the influence that I think is there is maybe the side that's a bit more democratic,
Mm.
right? Because I remember starting capoeira or seeing how it was in Brazil for the times that I've been. Mestre says one thing, that's it, right? Like, there's no discussion. Um, it's also a good thing because if everybody starts to put their grain of salt, it's like you're not going to get nowhere, right? You need a balance, right, for people to understand. But um, I think being here, from what I saw from the changes that I've noticed, is that maybe you have a bit more freedom to speak your mind or to make suggestions or to maybe ask more questions in class or even in private afterwards, right? Um, I think mostly that would be the change that I would say Canadian or North American culture has had on capoeira. The other stuff that we might think of, I think it's maybe just stereotypical things that people think, and it's like it's not actually that, right? So, but I think those are the main changes or ways that it was affected. I think. Besides that, I can't really think of anything that the culture here would have influenced capoeira into.
Now let's flip the coin. Let's take it from the other perspective. Do you think that those people have who have sought after, like those Canadians who have sought after capoeira, um, have you seen, or can you think of ways that maybe capoeira has influenced, or capoeira culture, Brazilian culture has influenced them as
Mm.
Canadians? Let's talk about you, for
Uh,
instance. You know, since you're, you know, like, do you think it's how do you think it's changed your or influenced you in any way? otherwise that, or in ways that Canadian culture would not have otherwise influenced you?
I think the way that Brazilian culture has influenced me is, or let's say capoeira, and that it's in the perspective, in the way to see things, to have a bit more, how can I say, not to be distrustful, but always have your eye
Mm,
open,
mm,
a bit
mm.
street smart. You don't know, you turn your back, you know what's gonna happen, right? To always have that in the back of your mind that
Yeah,
always that, because in the harder, that's what happens. If you're not looking, well, something can happen. It's too bad for you if you're the one not looking.
yeah.
Um, to me, it's opened me up to more things culturally, as far as the dancing, the singing. Singing is something I would never have done in my life, for the life of me. Never you would have taught me singing anything. Capoeira, capoeira brought me to sing and enjoy it and love doing it and writing songs and singing and just going at it. So
Yeah.
capoeira's done that for me. So
As
that's a big influence.
well, and at some point, as young earnest students, when we pick up that pandero and stand up at the bateria, and then suddenly you get that look, right, and you're like, oh damn, I'm supposed to sing now. You don't have much of a choice, right? Right?
Yeah.
It's or when you're standing on the edge of the hoda, it's no different than as a young student standing on the edge of the hoda, and one of the older students comes up behind you and kind of just puts their hand on your back and is like, come on, you're going in, let's go, right?
Mm,
You don't really have much of a choice, do you? At a certain point.
nah. Yeah, but I mean, you can either do it just to get it out of the way, but to
Hmm.
actually do it and and fully appreciate it and then start to, no, I want to go sing, right? Like I miss singing in the harder now because
Yeah,
with
yeah.
all of
I
this
think,
going on, like
and
I just want to grab a beating bow and go sing and have that going on.
I want to, yeah. And you touched on this in the beginning when we were talking, like when it comes down to when you start to really learn the language so that you can truly understand what's you're singing about,
Hmm.
right? And then you start to identify situations that you can now relate to songs. You can say, oh, you know what? This is a good song for this moment right now. Or
Exactly.
you've got some friends that enter the Hada and you're like, you know what? I've been waiting for this person to step in. I've got something I want to say to you through this song, right?
Yep.
But that doesn't happen until that language connection is made, right?
Exactly.
And that's, I think, probably, um, I mean, there's a lot of physical hurdles for anybody to learn, but for North Americans or anybody who's non-Portuguese speaking, that's probably got to be the next biggest hurdle. But when that happens, when you step through that door, or when you connect those two pieces, like the the appreciation and the understanding, more so the understanding,
Hmm.
of what you're saying and how it relates to the situation, and then knowing what to sing in the right times, right? In the right
Exactly.
situation, right? Um, that
It makes me
changes.
think of a saying that I heard someone say, and I was like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's something that needs to be brought forth more. Is that when you're singing in the harda, whether you have an instrument or not, whether you're beginner or more advanced, but more so when you're much more advanced, it's um, are you just singing what you want to sing, or are you going to sing what the harda needs?
Yes.
Like, oh, when I heard that, I was like, I never thought about it that way,
Yeah.
and then click, the light goes on. It's like, yeah, okay. Because sometimes the energy can be one way, and then you put in that song, and boom, you just bring
Yeah.
the heart at the other
There
level.
was, I forget where I heard the analogy, but there was, I heard this analogy of, um, when it comes to music and the hoda, and especially if you're holding the gunga, you are the DJ, right?
Yeah.
It's like being a DJ at a wedding, and the hoda is everybody sitting at the tables. They just had their dinner and desserts and whatever, and now you've got to draw them in, right? So you start with something that's kind of nice, calm and casual, and it brings a few people to the floor because they like this song, whatever, right? And then you kind of build up on that energy, and you got to know when to kind of like speed things up and change, the tone of the song or the tone of the message that's being sung,
Hmm.
and then it brings more and more people to the dance floor basically. And as when you're running the bateria, it's the same thing, right? You've got to be able to do that. You can't just come out of the gates, blaring loud guitars, and,
Yeah.
and everybody's like, nobody's feeling it at that point, right? You got to have that build up, right? You know, so
Yeah, like sometimes it works, but sometimes you need to bring it down here a little bit and
yeah,
maintain that, like
because
each.
it gets out of hand sometimes.
Yeah, that too.
So it's like, okay, calm, everybody. Let's just settle down a little. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, no, that's been a big thing for. I mean, it's a personal thing on a personal level for me, as I've for the past couple of years been really making an effort to understand and be able to speak Portuguese, and then going back to the music, and then not only do the songs have more meaning to me with respect to what's going on in the roda, or not identifying what's being, when to sing what and when or where, or for who, for that matter, because we can't
Mhm.
forget that there are some songs that, you know, depending on who, we could be, like in my case, well, technically we don't have graduados in our academy, but, if I'm holding the gunga, and for instance, you and Camarão come to the Peja Bateria, and I decide to, start singing mais eu, Falcão bateu embaixo do compadre, a bananeira caiu. It's like the two of you were gonna look at me like, what are you doing? Right?
Yeah. If you come here, get some of
Yeah,
this.
yeah. Yeah, you want us? Okay, yeah. Somebody's gonna take the beating bow from me and say, get in there, right? Um, so yeah, I mean, it's not only that, but then even on the, some of the songs you can start to relate to on a personal level, right? In
Yeah.
in one way or another, which then changes. Having that sentiment changes how we play in the holiday as well. Um, and I
Yeah,
know.
because you see the game with another lens. Like every
Yes.
the detail is just another lens that you put into your eye, and it's like, oh, now I can see this, now I can see that, now I understand this,
Yeah.
and you can adapt, change your game to go with that.
For sure. For sure. So, um, one last thing I wanted to ask you about, as someone who's been teaching and running their own academy, is tell me, or tell us and the listeners, um, what has been maybe one of your most memorable or most proudest moments at your own academy?
Hmm, good question. I was thinking about that one a lot. Proudest moments at my academy where I teach, or in the group itself.
Well, yeah, open it up. It doesn't have to be specifically within your academy, but if that's where the moment was, or great. If it's
Um, I remember that one time that I was really proud because I saw the payoff, right, for something. So
mm,
I was teaching a lot for Mespinia at his academy. I don't remember at that time if I was teaching my own class yet or not, but I think I was. But we had an event coming up, and we had a tournament. And I was teaching sequences and movements and combinations. And I taught this in class where I made this drill where you would catch the person in a tesoura de frente,
mm,
right? They fake them out with something, fake them out to get the opening. If the person responds accordingly, get them with a tesoura de frente, come out and land a scorpion on them as they're trying to get up.
mm,
And so I was doing this sequence, and I was like, "This is a fun sequence. I like it." And this girl, she's not my student, but I was teaching her a lot. She applied it in the tournament. She faked out someone with a meia lua de frente. The person went to the esquiva lateral. The leg was open, so the meia lua leg went behind one of the other person's
mm.
legs. She locked in the tesoura de frente, took her down. As the person is trying to come back up, Scorpion comes right in front, and she won her division in the competition. Not
Nice.
just for that, but that was like one big moment that everybody went, "Wow!"
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there in the corner. I'm like, Destiny looks at me, he's like, "That's you, ain't it?" I was like, "Yeah, that's me."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Yeah, that's the payoff." I was like, you teach something, the person applies it at the right moment. I was like, "Oh, wonderful." So
Nice. Nice.
that's
Yeah.
the proud moment that I had.
Cool. Cool. All right. Well, let's tie it off with a little shameless plug. Why don't you let everybody know where you are, how to get in contact with you, and because I know all of us have, I know we've all been suffering as running martial arts academies, with COVID. So let's get a little shameless plug, and we'll let you get back to doing whatever it is that you're doing in Montreal.
All right. So, well, if anybody's looking for me, my name is Contra-Mestre Pirata. My website is westislandcapoeira.com. Same thing on Facebook. If you look for our page on Facebook, it's West Island Capoeira on Facebook. That's how you get in touch with us. You can find us on Google Places or whatever. So we're there. No Instagram. It's too much social media for me. That's why I got the line and said, nah. That's where it stops. I just wanted to mention one thing that we were talking about earlier, the challenges of running your own academy.
Mm,
The business side of it was what we talked about, the publicity, but on the personal side is to have your work, family life, and capoeira
mm,
for that to work. That's a challenge in itself because if it's your academy, it's one thing, that's your main job. You're not doing any other job, but you're working like crazy. It depends on how many classes you're teaching. You could be gone all day, all evening because your peak hours are evening when your kids are supposed to be home.
right.
So you're sacrificing your family. So if you're teaching 5, 6 days a week because your academy is big, it takes a toll. If you're renting time out of the studio, you're really teaching 2, 3 times a week, like I'm doing 3 times. But even 3 times, I got 3 young kids that are growing up, so it's 3 times that. Well, 2 evenings that I'm not there that I won't see them all day.
Yeah.
So your main job, your family life, your capoeira life, you have to train yourself. So I train mostly teaching my class now. Like that's pretty much what I do. So all of that is a huge challenge because it's not because you get to a teacher level that you stop teaching, everything, whether it's formado or instructor or mestre,
Yeah.
you still got to at least train. You might not be able to train at the academy with everybody else, but at least if you're moving, training with your students, going to events, still staying relevant, still staying there in the community. That community contact is super important. It's also hard to maintain at some point when you got all of that going on.
Yeah,
So
for
some,
sure,
some of
for
the
sure.
challenges of teaching.
It's very demanding, which which makes it like it's important that that you've got a partner who can understand and appreciate what you're doing.
Very. Uh,
And yeah, I know you do. I know you do for sure. Um, I said Vampier's been by your side for quite some time, right?
yeah.
So, and yeah, so definitely, it's definitely a huge challenge for sure because you got to tie that all in, especially, like you said, at a certain point, something's got to give, right? So, either you stop going to train with Mestre so that you can just focus on running your own classes and your family and your day job,
Mhm.
um, and or letting go of events that you would normally travel to. I know here in Canada we have our event season, which is what, like May till September, pretty much, right?
Yeah.
And it's
Everything at the
weekend,
same time.
weekend after weekend after weekend. It just go, there's events always going on, and you're getting pulled in multiple directions, right?
Yeah.
Invitations, especially when you've reached your level, you're getting invitations to be a guest at those events, and I can imagine that can have a toll. So
Yeah.
it's difícil manter equilíbrio, né?
É difícil, só que tem que saber como separar as coisas para dar um jeito
Tá,
e
tá.
não fazer demais. Right? You go a bit
Exatamente.
too much, you lose yourself.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, listen, I want to thank you. I know we had a few technical challenges to get started, but we've overcome those, and I'm gonna let you get back to your family and to doing things there. All right,
Thank you for having me. I
no
feel
problem.
honored. So thanks for
Yeah,
giving me for this.
no problem.
Great, yeah, great idea for a project. Like I told you on the message, I was actually thinking
Yeah,
in the weeks prior that we need some stuff like that going on online because we can watch it at different times. We don't have to be live at the moment it's going on, but to have that platform going on with people in the community, it's like why not?